I'm Danielle Strachmann. I am co-founder of 1517 Fund, which is a fund. We used to say we were based out of the Bay Area, but since the pandemic, we're a fully distributed team. But we started our fund 7 years ago because my co-founder and I were on the founding team of the teau Fellowship Program. And we saw some really extraordinary results out of that program, working with people who have become household names before they were household names. So people like Patronage with Ethereum, Dylan Field with Figma, Ritesh with oil rooms, Laura Deming with the Longevity Fund. And we were really making a philanthropic bet on these young people and saying, hey, we want to give you money because we think you have potential to do something greater and we want to give you this support. That program has been incredibly successful. So my co-founder and I stepped away 7 years ago to start a venture fund as a Fellowship 2.0. And that's what I'm working on these days. And here are the slides. Fantastic. Yeah. Excellent. I can just control it. Yeah, I should be good to go.
You're independent.
Let me just make sure Okay. Perfect. All right, so we're going to be talking about accelerating the future and reaching the frontiers of knowledge, enabling young talent through direct patronage. So our tagline at the teau Fellowship, which I just told you all a little bit about, was some ideas just can't wait. Some things are extraordinarily important, even when we don't know them or understand them. Things like, blockchain 10 plus years ago when we started working with people like Vitalik. And we wanted to be able to fund people to work on those extraordinary ideas. So I love, it's really, this talk was interesting for me to put together because it was a bit of a blast from the past happening. This quote, a radical rethinking of what it takes to succeed, the teau Fellowship encourages lifelong learning and independent thought with a $100,000 grant. So that's non-dilutive and 2 years free to pursue their dreams. teau Fellows are changing the world. And so that was over 10 years ago that we were saying that. What I always said about the teau Fellowship program was it's a 2-year program with a 10-year time horizon. There was some, I think, good foresight there because that has come to pass as the examples that I talked about earlier of people, building some really novel things. And over here, in this article from 2022, people are talking about, maybe we should have been paying attention to that fellowship program. Maybe there's some things to learn there. But when we started the program, people thought we were heretical. Larry Summers, the former president of Harvard, is quoted saying that we were the most misguided piece of philanthropy when we started. It's nice to be able to say, I think we've proven you wrong. So these are some of the young people that we've worked with, people like Dylan Field from Figma, who had the extreme financial fortunate event to sell to Adobe for $20 billion. People like Ritesh with oil rooms, which I think still stands as the second largest hotel chain in the world. Laura Deming with the Longevity Fund. Her fund backs, early biotech and health tech companies with the goal to eliminate aging. 3 of her companies have IPO'd. She started the fund when she was 17. Even we thought she was crazy to start her fund. She came and pitched the teau Foundation after she got it. This would happen actually somewhat frequently. People would apply to the fellowship with a particular idea. Hers was to be doing longevity research. We'd say, okay, great, you get a teau Fellowship, but there's that moment of thinking you know what you're going to do with funding and resources, and then the what can sometimes be, in this particular instance, like an early quarter life crisis of, oh wow, now I have all these resources, what do I really want to do with it? So Laura came to us and said, you know what, screw research, I want to do the funding side of things. She was 17, she had never obviously raised a venture fund before. I think she's on fund 3 or 4 at this point. And then we have Austin from Luminar Technologies. They build a LiDAR system that is going on next year's Volvo. So really excited for a safer future. One thing that, and of course Vitalik, and this is just a handful of the people who have done some great things through the program. The things that these people had in common when we started working with them is, one, nobody knew who they were. They didn't have a track record of success, and they were all under 19 years old when we decided to give them funding and resources. I said this a little bit earlier, but my co-founder and I 7 years ago said, gosh, like our community is building really amazing things, but one thing that we saw was that it was often hard for young people to get taken seriously by the status quo, including investors. There's a lot of lip service paid to young talent, but I think usually when investors say that they believe in young talent, they mean come work at my portfolio company. They don't mean I want to give you money. So my co-founder and I stepped aside 7 years ago to say, hey, we want to build a fellowship 2.0 and really scale our work. So we do grant funding, angel funding, and pre-seed funding predominantly for founders who do not have a college degree or deep tech scientists who leave academia to pursue the frontiers of knowledge. Quick plug for my co-founder's book, Paper Belt on Fire, is coming out at the end of this month. I got myself a pre-order and a copy, and it's really good. And I'm not, I am biased, but it is actually a really interesting read. And I'll be talking a little bit more about the credentialist impulse to keep every talented young person in a classroom for 17 years or more is holding our society back. So some interesting things that we've been thinking about at 1517 is just the context in which things like the fellowship and things like 1517 have come about. And there is a researcher, Benjamin Jones, who's an economist, who started looking at age of scientific invention and productivity. And I'll go through these quickly, but I think they're really important. And I too would like to think about these things more and dive in deeper. But the average age of launching a first invention went from being 23 to 31 years old over the last 100 years. Now there could be like many reasons for this. We could probably debate this for hours. That's not what this is about, but just some food for thought here. Today, innovators are 6 years older when they achieve their greatest accomplishment, average age of 40. It used to be closer to 30. Scientists and innovators slow down in their later years despite living longer. So I know a lot of us are here to talk about longevity, but I think one thing to think about is like, if we're not actually able to be as productive and as creative longer, that's a problem. And so combined with their greatest achievements starting later, their whole output is truncated. There appears to be a narrowing of creativity the later one starts. Also really important thinking about, when I think about the people on the slide that I presented a few minutes ago, like Dylan and Laura, because they started so young and have also been able to amass positive reputation and capital and whatnot, I think about, my God, like what are these people going to be doing, when they're, Dylan is, I think, just turning 30, and Laura is in her mid to late 20s at this point. So it gives me a lot of existential hope for where are we going in the future because they got started so early. And then lastly, Professor Jones posits that there's been a 30% decline in the number of inventions and discoveries since people are starting their careers about 10 years later. And by career, he means like innovation career and actual invention, patents, things like this. So the conclusion, the shorter the period that innovators spend innovating, the less their output as individuals over their lifespan. If innovation is central to technological progress, then forces that reduce the length of active innovative careers will reduce the rate of technological progress. This effect will be particularly strong if innovators do their best work when they are young. So this to me is like super red flags going off. Like, okay, yes, longevity is great, but we also need to get people started sooner. Obviously very outlier example, Einstein here, at the age of 26, was starting to make groundbreaking discoveries. So one thing that we posit is that institutions really hold people back because there's this notion that you can't actually start being creative or innovating on something until someone else has knighted you and said, okay, you are good enough to now do this. There is a lot that could be said about institutions in general. I think as a way to try to scale trust, I think individuals have put a lot of trust in institutions, but there are downsides of this. So a couple things about institutions such as universities. This is a clock tower on a university campus. Barrier to entry is very high. Being able to leave is also very high. The average time people are spending in school is longer and longer, and it's not just for undergrad, it's for getting their master's, it's for getting a PhD. Schools are not so much about teaching the masses or critical thinking, otherwise they would be doing it more effectively and actually measuring it. There's a lot of research to show that they don't. It rewards herd behavior, which causes a lot of just mimetic thinking within these systems. And you can't forward your own ideas until you forward somebody else's. It's expensive in money, time, and opportunity costs. So one way I like to think about this, especially being in Europe right now, is I'll talk to European founders and they're like, "Oh, school is free, so it's not that bad for me to be spending time here." But the time opportunity cost is really high, and I like to think about this like travel. I think subjectively 4 years for undergrad, for example, or 8 years for a PhD is subjectively longer than it used to be because the choices are different now. If you can start a company in your dorm room on a laptop, then I think we all can tell, like, it just does feel longer. It'd be like saying, to get to this conference, you're going to have to ride a horse and then get on a boat and do this. No, it's like, I'm going to get on an airplane and I'm going to do it. And I think there's some really interesting things between transportation and time travel. And I like to think about education in the same way. So what do dropouts, renegades, and deep tech scientists need to get to the frontiers of knowledge faster? They need more people like Peggy Guggenheim. So she is a direct patron of the arts, has done a lot to bring a lot of people to the forefront, hosted a lot of people's first showings. And I think this is interesting. I didn't realize that Foresight was going to have such like a crossover between the arts and the sciences. And then yesterday I was like, oh, this is great. Like, how cool. So I think a lot about direct patronage in the arts because people don't really question it as much. If you're, someone who looks like a crazy eccentric and you want to give money to artists, no one really questions you doing it. But if you want to give it to a scientist or someone who has a radical idea, people will throw lots of stones at you. And there's another thing that I find interesting too, where a lot of people will ask us at 15, 17, or when we're at the fellowship, like, what sort of traits do you look for in people? And actually in Michael's book, we outline an entire chapter of all the traits that we look for, and they're things that we've coined ourselves over time. But I don't know that happens in the arts so much. I don't know that people get asked, like, well, how did you know that it would be worthwhile to back this particular artist? I tried Googling for some of these things and doing some research and haven't found anything, but if anyone has any information about the link on direct patronage in the arts and what characteristics they look for there, I'd be very curious about that. I wanted to show a quick video, just like a minute of it. Oh, what did I do? I might skip it. Yeah, I'll skip it. No? Are you sure? Maybe just exit it?
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
We can just
click on it? Okay, great.
Let's see. Open link in new tab. I think it might work. Yeah, we want to do. That's working, right?
Yes, this is the website. So now we have to accept.
I think it's just the Wi-Fi can do a little.
There we go. Yeah, it's coming. Let's see if this is gonna work, because this is the video, but I think it's still loading.
It's loading.
I might come back to it in a minute.
Yeah.
Come on. Maybe not.
No.
Well, it's still trying.
Well,
I'll keep going, and then at the end, if it works, I can jump back.
Yeah.
And so this quote I loved, and this was actually about backing the arts. The model of backing otherwise impossible ideas is still alive and well. And one thing that is interesting was to note the differences between patrons of the art who are buying pieces versus who are really backing the artists themselves and saying, hey, do whatever you want next, here's some funding to do it. So really like curating the future of what that looks like. So I think it may have been Jeff Lewis who was previously at Founders Fund, who coined the term belief capital, or at least made it very popular. But belief capital is this idea of people who are going to back you first and say, hey, I believe in you, I'm going to give you this money. You know, there may be no like reason why we should believe in you right now, but we're going to do it. This also happens in the art world as well. You know, so just some quotes here from some different artists saying like the emotional support was as valuable as the financial assistance. And we hear the same thing at 1517. You know, we don't put words like this on our website, but people constantly tell us, you believed in me first. Like we do grants as well as our investment checks. And you know, one of our founders we recently got together with, Series D company at this point called Entopology. We were the first checked into the company. And he said he got 27 no's before he got our yes. And we just met a couple weeks in New York, and I didn't know that story. And I was like, wow, that's so crazy. Like, and I'm sure of those 27 no's, there were probably at least like, you know, 100 pitch meetings he took, and some of them were ghosting and whatnot. So very interesting to think about. You know, people saying things like, I have an incredible infrastructure, I can take risks, not always be thinking about how to pay the rent. And yeah, setting me free to do what I love essentially is here. And we hear the same thing from founders as well.
Just want to give you a few minutes warning if you
Yep.
want to have time to do the.
Yep, no,
We
I'm
have
just
10
finishing
minutes
up.
left.
Oh, no, perfect. I'm just finishing up. You know, so one of the takeaways that actually runs into what you were saying earlier today is one thing that I would love to see are more fellowships coming forward, especially that offer funding to people. You know, these things can look like, you know, different fellowships that we know. These can look like angel investors. These can look like things like DAOs as well. One thing that I really love is the 776 fellowship. So I talked to the program director over there, and it is very much based on the teau fellowship, which is kind of fun. And I was like, oh yes, imitation is a form of flattery. I feel very flattered. And talked to the director, and they're very much focused on climate. And my colleague and I are actually seeding some new ideas right now of, well, what if we could get a bunch of different fellowships started that are in very specific areas? Because when we were working at the fellowship, it was really hard to find even like 400 young people to apply to our program, and we were picking 20 of them as fellows. But nowadays, I know the fellowship gets something like 10,000 plus applications a year. We are overloaded with what we do at 1517 as well. And so I think there could be a lot more mechanisms, and ways to get funded. Just a little case study here. This is one of our more recent companies, but they started, these two, Jonathan and Tyler, ended up finding some research essentially in the basement of Vanderbilt around energy. And these guys did not have a background in the area, and they just thought, this is really fascinating. Why hasn't someone worked on this before? They started making inroads and connections with people in the field. They came to us a few years ago, and we wrote them a $50K check, investment check, to get them started. And today they're raising their Series B. Their team is 20 people. They started as 2. They're going to be doubling next year and servicing major contracts to make energy more powerful, more efficient, especially in really remote areas. So it's just, I say that I get to basically get to drink from the fountain of youth every day, as well as get to work on some really amazing projects. And we just want to see more people doing things like this. So contact information, reach out anytime. Happy to talk here. Buy Michael's book. It's really good. Yes, I'm biased, but I think it is very, very good. And happy to take some questions.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you so much, Danielle.
I can see it. I'm going to check and see if that video loaded. Oh, it did. Okay, I have to show you this video. I watch this, like, sometimes I see something and then I have to watch it on loop like 100 times because I'm like, oh my God, this is brilliant. And this is about the art patronage world. And I just think it's really interesting, and also maybe the best, like, visceral yes for things like NFTs and blockchain within the art world. Come on.
Oh no.
It's thinking about it. Or maybe I can just let it sit and
Can you show us the
see what
title so we
happens.
can look it up later?
Can I change?
Just
Yes.
scroll down a bit.
Let's go.
Oh, there it goes. Okay, great. Perfect. We're just gonna watch it in a minute.
In the art market, patrons enable artists and galleries by buying art and supporting artists' careers. This is the famous Skull auction in 1973, in which foremost pop art collectors Robert and Ethel Skull.
Oh, did I? Oh, it's yep. All right. It's going to take a second. I'll let it load up a little bit more. The scene is just so good. Like, I can't wait for you to see it.
You're teasing us so
I know,
much
it's
with
really,
the video.
it's so good. Yeah, no, I wish, oh, here we go. Okay, let's see if we can get it.
Sold off 50 works from their collection.
Okay, so you're saying that Skull sold off 50 works from his private collection of this one artist.
That's Robert Rauschenberg, shoving Robert Skull after the collector sold several of the artist's works.
I've been working my ass off for you to make that profit?
All the artists got upset at this ad collector selling stuff for like $100,000 that he paid $1,000 or $2,000 for.
How about yours that you're going to sell now? I've been working for you too. We work for each other.
Without realizing that now they were going to become wealthy themselves.
You buy the next one, okay? Why not? Right, you buy the next one.
This kind of thing hadn't really happened before. It's a key moment in understanding how patronage relates to the market today. This is one kind of patronage. Here's another. The model of backing otherwise impossible ideas is still alive and well.
I just put all my money into production more than into collecting.
But is it still...
So I think that was really interesting. She puts money into what she calls production instead of collecting, and that's that like very direct patronage model. But yeah, I just love that scene where the guy like pushes him and says, "You didn't even buy me flowers. Like you bought my art for $1,000, and now you're selling it for $100K. Like, wow, pretty amazing." But yeah, that's the video. So yeah, happy to discuss more. Questions, comments?
Just in terms of kind of replicating the university model, that's something that I'm super interested in right now, like a startup college. It was actually, the idea came when I was applying to Theo Fellowship back in 2017, I think. And basically I looked up the stats of what Theo Fellowship was. And the key statistic that was like difficult for me wanting to be an entrepreneur was not understanding why there were no options for me to be valued for being a visionary while young.
Right.
I'm like, if my time is worth $50 an hour, why is there no one who's willing to pay me $25 an hour to work on this sort of task?
Yeah.
And I think what Theo Fellowship proved was the fact that on average, the hourly value is probably above $100 an hour. Way above it actually if you calculate it directly out. I did the calculations back then. So since then I didn't go obviously directly into like I wanted to prove it myself, and then I did, and now I'm at the point where I'm kind of transitioning. But I'm curious why none of the funds have gone to the university model, which is to say a startup college that's really providing the you can be even more economically resourceful by providing basically the tuition, just the sustainability-ness to get someone onto the exponential path. Right. Much less than $100,000. Yeah. Especially in places like India.
A couple things. There's a new startup called Slingshot that matches high schoolers with companies, and they're getting paid real salaries to do work. So on that like dollar per hour thing, people are starting to notice. We tongue-in-cheek like to say that child labor is good in a non-exploitative way. But as to the question of, we do see universities sort of employing certain things like this, where it's like universities have their own venture funds, things like that. But I can't think, there's certain campuses that have more entrepreneurial thinking, like Olin College is a great example of this. But I haven't seen, so there is, I talked to the director of, what do they call it? Not UT. I think they just call it University of Austin. And they want to have a more entrepreneurial model in terms of how they do it, but I don't know that they have the sort of like, hey, how are the finances going to work to run this going right now? So I haven't seen too many models of like, okay, why have these people not done this? But like, I have a similar question of like, why haven't more people started fellowships of their own? Like, and even with the Teal Fellowship, as great as it was that we were doing it, it was still only 20 people per year, and it's still very clear that there were way more than that we would love to work with. I have
question, which is I love the let 1,000 fellowship blooms. By the way, a reference to the is it a feminist manifesto?
Mao Zedong.
Of the
Yes, so both. There's it's a two-pronged reference. One is Let 1,000 Nations Bloom, which is an old blog that the Seasteading Institute used to have that my colleague wrote on, and then yes, Let 1,000 Flowers Bloom as the historical reference.
Okay. And okay, how do we how does it happen?
Yeah.
Like.
So I think there's some interesting things occurring where you are having these ultra high net worth people like Alexis starting 776 and showing like, hey, this works and it's a model. Being able to be 12 years out from the fellowship and being able to say, hey, here's what happened and this was worth doing, and waiting that 10-year time period to have these results. So I do think that these ultra high net worth people are able to see some of these things and that's starting to happen. But to your talk earlier about things like DAOs and things like that, it could be a model that works within something like that. Like, when I was looking at the Foresight Fellowship, I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I wish y'all had money to like give these people resources to do even more.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious about like community driven funding and resources.
Yeah. I want to have more of this discussion. I think it's the end of the
Yes,
session.
yeah.
I just want to say that the structural problem that I see is like society is not built in a way that like incentives make it so that like we have all these high net worth individuals who are like gonna like be incentivized out of something else than their benevolence to make these things work better. It is the problem with a model that's solely based on philanthropy. Is like we're not building the structure of the incentive structure for that to work on a large scale society level. Anyways, it's the end of the session. Thank you so much. I hope we can talk more about it. I'm like really passionate about it. There will be a session this afternoon with Primavera de Filippi called Institutions, which is totally continuing on this. I think it would be super interesting. I don't know, you may have other things planned, but still talking about building different forms of institutions and how they could work. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you, Danielle.